My friends, I want to talk to you today about something we don't often like to hear. There are times in life when God tells us to walk away. There are times when He whispers to our hearts, it's time to let go. Now, this isn't easy. We love, we care, we invest our time, our prayers, our energy into people. But sometimes God closes a door for our good. Sometimes holding on can do more harm than good. And if we're not careful, we can end up carrying burdens God never meant for us to carry. So how do we know when God is telling us to step away? How do we know when He is saying, it's time to let go? There are times in life when we meet people who seem important, people we grow attached to, people we believe we are meant to walk with for a long time. But as time goes on, something begins to change. You find yourself slipping, losing the passion you once had for God. The fire that once burned bright in your heart starts to dim, and you can't quite put your finger on why. At first it seems small. You start skipping time with God because you're too busy with them. You begin compromising in ways you never would have before. Maybe you let certain conversations slide, even when they go against what you know is right. Maybe you stop speaking up about your faith because you don't want to offend them. Or perhaps you start engaging in things that, deep down, you know don't honor God, but you tell yourself it's not a big deal. Slowly, the things of God become less important. Church feels like an obligation instead of a joy. Praying becomes something you do when you have time, rather than the foundation of your day. Your convictions aren't as strong as they used to be, and instead of sharpening you, this person is dulling your spiritual edge. God never calls us to hold on to relationships that pull us away from Him. If someone is leading you further from the truth, if their influence in your life is making you less like Christ, that is a clear sign that God is telling you to step away. No person, no relationship, no friendship is worth losing your closeness with God. The enemy will always use distractions to weaken your walk, and sometimes those distractions come in the form of people we never expected. There's a difference between someone who is struggling with faith and someone who has completely rejected the truth. We are called to be patient, to love, to guide, and to pray for others, but we are not called to force someone to believe. When a person repeatedly turns away from correction, when they dismiss God's word over and over, when their heart grows harder despite every effort to lead them to the truth, it may be time to step back. At first, you may try to explain things in a different way. You may pray harder, hoping they will finally see what God is showing them. You may feel burdened for them, believing that if you just stay a little longer, if you just say the right thing, they will change. But change does not come by force. God never overrides free will, and neither can we. There comes a point when staying in someone's life becomes more harmful than helpful. You start exhausting yourself, pouring out everything you have while they continue to reject what God is trying to do. They argue, they resist, they push back, and no matter how much you try, nothing seems to get through. This is not a failure on your part. This is a choice on theirs. Jesus Himself told His disciples that if a town refused to listen, they were to shake the dust from their feet and move on. That was not an act of anger, but an act of obedience. You cannot force someone to accept the truth. You cannot make someone receive what they are unwilling to hear. God calls us to speak, to pray, and to love. But He does not call us to stay where our presence is no longer making a difference. There are moments in life when God makes it clear that a relationship, friendship, or situation is not meant to continue. The signs are there, the warnings have come, and yet we struggle to accept it. We pray for things to go back to how they were. We fight to hold on, believing that if we try a little harder, if we just wait a little longer, things will change. But when God closes a door, no amount of effort can reopen it. At first, it may feel confusing. Conversations that once flowed easily now feel strained. Plans fall through again and again. Distance grows, misunderstandings increase, and what once felt natural now feels forced. You begin to sense that something isn't right, that something has shifted. You may even ask God why things are becoming difficult, not realizing that He is the one making the path harder to walk. Sometimes God removes people from our lives for our protection. He sees what we do not. He knows what is ahead. The very thing we are trying to hold on to could be the very thing that is keeping us from His best. We may think we need them, but God knows they are no longer part of the journey He has prepared for us. Holding on to what God has removed can bring unnecessary pain. It can delay the blessings He wants to give. It can keep us stuck in a place we were never meant to stay. God's direction is not always easy to understand in the moment, but when a door closes, it is not without purpose. It may hurt. It may not make sense right away, but trusting Him means letting go when He makes it clear that it is time. There are relationships that drain more than they pour. At first, you may not notice it. You give, you support, you encourage, believing that one day things will balance out. But over time, you realize that no matter how much you invest, no matter how much you pour into this person, you are left feeling empty. You walk away from conversations feeling exhausted instead of uplifted. You find yourself emotionally and spiritually depleted, carrying burdens that were never meant to be yours. Godly relationships strengthen and sharpen. They bring encouragement, wisdom, and growth. They may challenge you, but they do not leave you feeling broken. When a relationship constantly leaves you drained, when it feels like you are the only one trying, when you are always the one fixing, helping, and holding everything together, something is not right. At first, you may tell yourself that this is what love looks like: sacrificing, giving, enduring. But even Jesus took time to step away and be renewed. Even Jesus, who healed and taught the multitudes, would withdraw to be alone with the Father. If the Son of God needed moments of rest, how much more do we? There are people who take but never give, people who always need but never pour back, people who keep you tied to chaos, dysfunction, and emotional exhaustion. These relationships will steal your joy, weaken your faith, and leave you feeling empty. You were not created to carry people who refuse to walk on their own. If you are constantly feeling depleted, if a relationship is costing you your peace, your energy, and your closeness with God, it may be a sign that He is telling you to release it. Not every person who enters your life is meant to stay. One of the greatest ways God speaks to us is through His peace. When we are walking in His will, there is a sense of assurance, a deep knowing that we are where we are meant to be. But when something is not right, when we are holding on to someone God is asking us to release, that peace begins to fade. Instead of joy, there is anxiety. Instead of clarity, there is confusion. Instead of feeling secure, you feel unsettled. At first, you may dismiss it. You may think it's just your emotions, just a rough season, just a misunderstanding. But over time, the unrest grows stronger. No matter how much you try to convince yourself that things will get better, deep down, you know something isn't right. The conversations don't bring the same joy they used to. The connection feels strained. There is a weight you can't explain, a heaviness in your spirit that won't go away. God does not call us to live in constant turmoil. His word says in Colossians 3:15, "Let the peace of Christ rule in your hearts." That means peace is meant to be a guide, a sign of His presence in a situation. If you have prayed, if you have sought God's direction, and yet peace is nowhere to be found, it may be time to listen to what He is trying to tell you. Ignoring the loss of peace can lead to heartbreak. It can keep you in places God never intended for you to stay. It can cause you to settle for less than what He has planned. When peace leaves, it is often a sign that God is asking you to let go. His will is never found in confusion, only in the stillness of His presence. Fear has a way of keeping us trapped in situations that God is calling us to leave. It whispers lies, making us believe that if we let go, we will be left with nothing. It tells us that if we walk away, we will never find anyone else. It convinces us that things will get better if we just hold on a little longer. But fear is never from God. God calls us to walk by faith, not by fear. There are times when we hold on to people, not because they are good for us, but because we are afraid of what life will look like without them. We become so used to their presence, even when it is unhealthy, that we convince ourselves we cannot live without them. We settle for less than God's best because the unknown seems too frightening. But God never calls us to stay where we are only surviving. He calls us to thrive. When God asks us to release someone, it is never to harm us. It is always to position us for something greater. But if we allow fear to control us, we will miss the blessings he wants to bring into our lives. We will stay in places that drain us, relationships that hinder us, and connections that keep us from growing. Faith means trusting that if God is asking you to let go, he has something better ahead. It means believing that his plans are good, even when they don't make sense yet. It means surrendering what feels safe and familiar in exchange for what he has prepared. Fear will try to keep you stuck, but faith will lead you forward. What God has for you will never be found in a place you were meant to leave. My friends, I know letting go is not easy. It hurts to walk away from someone you care about. It's painful to release what you once held so tightly. But hear me, when God tells you to let go, it is always for your good. He sees what you cannot see. He knows what lies ahead. And if he is asking you to step away, it is because he has something better in store. You were not created to live in constant struggle, in confusion, in relationships that drain you and pull you away from him. God's plans for you are good. His path leads to peace, not chaos. And if you trust him, if you surrender what he is asking you to release, you will find that he is faithful. He will heal your heart. He will restore what was lost, and he will bring the right people into your life at the right time. So do not be afraid to let go. Do not be afraid to walk away when God says it's time. Because when you release what is not meant for you, you make room for the blessings he has been waiting to give you. Trust him. Obey him. And watch as he leads you into something greater than you ever imagined. God bless you.